Hi everyone, welcome to our sixth episode of Tea First podcast. Today we have a few part of tea brewing. We are going to explore what is spring tea, what is good to have during springtime now that the season is changing. Grab your tea first and join us.
Hi everybody, and we are talking about spring teas because springtime is upon us, even though it snowed last night and we had a blizzard the weekend before, but that's what happens in mid-March and early April. And so what I came into the table with is all these teas that Joyce has prepared. And all I gave her was kind of the topic, like, well, let's talk about spring teas because we're brainstorming a lot of different ideas of what to talk about today. And I won. I said spring teas. And then
It's perfect for the season.
Yeah.
It's April. In the Northeast, it does feel like spring is coming. Even though this year we don't get a lot of snow, but with the past few snowstorm, oh boy, it's just it's an unusual snowstorm where we have ice too, because it's not that cold where the snow is just fluff on the ground. It's just melt. Our tea branch broke down. All over the driveway on my birthday. Our car got totaled, right? Because the tree branch came down. But that's okay, that's life. It's okay. I moved past that. On a positive side, we are shopping for a new car. But back to tea. So yes, it's a feeling of April, right? It's kind of like a springy. And I know that a lot of people will have a question, what tea should I bring to my tea party? Because this is around the time that people start to think about tea party. Mother's Day is right around the corner. So we want to make some recommendations, and I brewed two pot of tea. Not exactly this is the one that will fit every palate because we only have 163 kinds of tea. So there's different kinds. This is not the only two that it's a must-have for spring tea. But, this is Darjeeling.
Okay.
So we have... And what's different category type that we have is the first flush and the second flush. And a lot of time customer asks what flush is. You have example of what something in the past that people don't understand in terms of what flush.
Well, yes. So flush typically means in the tea world means the first picking of the season, and then the second flush is the second picking of the tea season. We have run into some customers who get a little confused and refer to toilet bowl flushes and on how robust the deposit was, whether or not you needed one flush or two flushes. But that's not what we're talking about.
That's not what we're talking about, yes. So
flush really talks about the first picking.
Right, especially for the Indian tea, because Darjeeling is from the foothill of Himalayas. So the orange pickle kind of, that language is more, I don't hear first flush, second flush much to explain the Japanese or Chinese tea. Is that true?
No, you just hear springtime picking.
Right. They don't really use first flush, second flush very much when it comes to Japanese or Chinese tea.
Yeah,
so I would say
you're talking about a lot of things here. One of where we're at right now is where there is different terms for different teas and different processes, because this is a part of long histories of Japan and long histories of in China, and now here we are in India, and they all kind of have their own different terminologies. And we even talked about how oxidation could be called fermentation, but yet fermentation is really only for pu'er. And in China, there's red tea, which is not rooibos. It is like a black tea, but they call red tea. I put up a blog post on that regarding my trips through Chinatown and Boston and coming up with a jar that says red tea on it, right next to a jar that looks this exact same way from a different company that says black tea, just to confirm what we've experienced through our travels. And they don't have black tea, they have dark tea. So back to the terminology of first flush, I really think that is zeroed in on in India and I think Darjeeling, they call themselves a champagne of tea. So it's a little lighter character. It's not like most Indian black teas, which is strong and malty, which is usually from the southern part um, of India, or let's call it mainland India, as opposed to northeast, where you're talking about where you are in the foothills of the Himalayas. You are at a very unique terroir of where the tea is growing and what it's picking up through its growing. So even in Thailand, you don't have a first flush and second flush wine.
No. It's always hot.
It's always growing. Exactly right. There's suboptimal, which is the rainy season, but it's a shrub, so it's always growing. But where you have a climate where there is a winter, and there's certainly a winter in Japan, but you don't really call matcha first flush. You would just hear it as springtime, right?
Yeah, spring. Hand-picked.
Hand-picked, springtime. Yep, those are usually the adjectives to describe the different the timing. You'll see spring 2023. But the other terminology that I love to talk about when it comes to specifically Indian teas too. Again, you don't see it. You see it a little bit in China, but you don't see it anywhere else. Is you said orange pico. So if you look at the back of a Lipton tea bag, it says orange pico. That's the ingredient, right? And people say, well, what is that?
And a lot of time, I would have customers come in and look for orange flavor.
Right.
Like not knowing
right.
because of the word orange. And they would, and then someone who don't really know much about it would say, it has orange flavor. So I don't know if it really tastes orange, but maybe your brain tell you because your eyes see that it say orange. And you don't know, I don't know if that associates your brain with the orange flavor, that people do pick out orange. But orange pickle does not supposed to taste like orange.
Not at all. It's not. So that's another podcast altogether, is how you taste things, because you have a phenomenal taste. And sometimes, when tasting straight teas, pure teas, you would say, I would say, there's like a touch of cinnamon in this oolong, but it's not like a flavored cinnamon tea. So somebody could imagine orange in a straight tea. Right. Be like, yeah, it's orangey.
It does.
Like if I bite on an orange peel, like that sappiness. From a Lipton tea bag. But orange pico means tea, and it specifically means a tea leaf. And just to speed up the audience on where the word orange comes from, is actually the House of Orange. So the House of Orange is where a lot of the tea was being auctioned off, or the House of Orange was the royalty that was where tea was being auctioned. So the auction house honored tea by calling it, by putting in the word orange, because of the House of Orange and the royalty associated with it. So that's how orange got associated with tea. It's because of the House of Orange.
But it's not because it's the flavor.
Not because of the flavor, not because of the color. And here we are in Albany too, and the old term for Albany, the original name for Albany was House of Orange. Fort Orange, because of the House of Orange also. Going back
Dutch.
to our
strong Dutch background.
Dutch roots.
Got it. Nice.
So
back to
I didn't even get back to the orange pico. So there's a whole story with orange pico. So you have grading is where I'm going with this. So orange pico is the lowest grading, and you even have fannings and dust, and that is the lowest grading and least quality of tea. I haven't had my tea yet, so I'm
okay. Well, why don't I start pouring it so it can start flowing into your system? So this is
the highest grade of tea is, and I actually fumble the acronym around, but I know the funny acronym, and the funny acronym is far too good for ordinary people. And the ordinary people is orange pico. Finest, tippy, golden, flowery orange pico.
That's far for the normal people to have.
Far too good for ordinary people. It really isn't. It's we have it in our tea shop here.
Right,
You know,
right.
it's so if you usually again the lowest quality is OP, orange pico, and then you go with flowery orange pico, and then you go with golden flowery orange pico, and then you get tippy because you got just the tips. And like our Coral Dragon is a perfect example of the finest tippy golden flowery orange pico. But again, you wouldn't really see that on a Chinese brand, but maybe
Right.
from India you would.
They use that system.
Mhm.
Perfect. So I poured it side by side,
Mhm.
so the audience can see the difference of the color, right? We have a first flush and second flush going. And when you talked about flush earlier, is flush mean the time of picking? Because a lot of time people would come and ask me, what is different between these two? What flush means? So let's go back to the description of flush is the time of picking. So of course, first flush describe, let's say after the tea, winter season, the tea is under dormant stage, come out, that's the first picking, that's like the spring picking, right? So that's the first flush. And you see that the color is on the lighter side. And then the second flush is, a couple months after that, stepping into summer. So of course the tea leaves are more mature, right? Darker in color. So that's also result in the brew of the second flush. And do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with all that. I would say that there's a couple reasons why the first flush is most prized. One is because they say that the tea tree kind of holds on to all its nutrients in a dormant stage throughout the winter, and then when it gets to release it, it's going to push all the nutrients that it can in order to get a good start to the season, and then we get to enjoy it because it has great flavor. The other side of it has nothing to do with botany, but it has to do with availability. So if tea was scarce and there's no tea around through the winter months, but then all of a sudden tea buds start perking up, people start getting excited, the first ships are coming out of China, coming to Denmark, to the auction houses, and so that's going to obviously get a higher prize. And then it is a lighter flavor, which could also attribute to people saying, we like this flavor better. You don't know the cart before the horse. Is it because it's more expensive that they like it, or do they like it and that's why it's more expensive? I think it's more has a little bit to do with both marketing and flavor. For me particularly, I like a more robust flavor, which you get out of the second flush, which is going to be more flavorful. It's like you said, the leaf has been out, exposed to the elements a little bit longer. It's a hotter, maybe more drier climate, but it comes out more stronger, more punch. And Darjeeling, they strive for a flavor called grape muscatel. And I'd like to describe it, if you take a grape and you peel the skin off with your teeth. I used to do it as a kid. It might make me weird. But you get this kind of like sappy type of bitter but grape undertones. And that's what you really get out of a Darjeeling. So I think you get a little bit more out of a second flush. But white tea drinkers who like the real floral, light notes of tea would probably prefer the first flush.
So let's have a little sip
Okay.
and try.
Okay.
Let's have your tea first.
So we are going to take a sip, but you're going to take a break, and we'll be back in just a little bit.
All right, welcome back. So we actually now go back and taste the first flush together. Although I still some for the second flush already. But because a lot of time customer asks me, okay, I know now that you have the first flush and the second flush and it's the time of picking, but what makes them different, right? And go back to the characteristic of Darjeeling is that muscatel grape flavor. And so in-house, I do sell more of the second flush. And that's probably because it's stronger, it's bold, it leaves the characteristic of the black tea, right? I mean, here is the first flush. And earlier when we had the side-by-side, you can notice that the second flush is darker. And they both steep at 5 minutes. I don't steep one longer than the other. For black tea, you can go anywhere between, 4 or 5 or even 3 minutes if you like something very light. But it's pretty astringent already. Right? Do you agree that it has a good flavor already
Oh yeah,
at
this
5 minutes?
so 1 teaspoon
Per
per
8 ounce. Yep.
ounces, boiling water 205,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for 5 minutes. Yeah, I like this. I think I know exactly why they're calling it the champagne of teas. It looks like it has a nice light golden flavor, the golden appearance. The flavor is really nice and delicate. It is on the lighter side.
Mm-hmm.
But there is, a nice astringent finish too, but nothing that you need to add like milk or anything to.
So I would say I pick up definitely floral notes in here. So that's usually when I'm behind the counter and customer asks me what's different, and I describe time of picking, that's the main thing between first and second flush. But the characteristic that I usually describe is that the first flush is on, I said lighter, but it's not just because of color, but also flavor in term of like the boldness of it. Because in here, I can almost taste similar to some green tea that have like that greenish in it. And being the first flush of like the first picking of the year, I believe that the plant has a lot of like floral note, vegetal note to it, right? So that's what I pick up in the first flush. So that's usually what I tell the customer is like first flushes tend to be on the lighter, more floral notes, more vegetal notes.
Yeah.
Than the second flush with it when the plant is more strong. Bold and develop, right? The leaves are larger, more nutrients start to, spread out equally everywhere. The second flush seems to be more intense and bold. So if somebody really like black tea, they might enjoy the second flush better.
Yeah.
Now also in my own head is that, when plants develop, right, flower and then fruit is muscatel is grape, right? That's what the characteristic of Darjeeling.
Yep.
Fruit come after the floral. So it's almost explained to me that like the first flush you get more like floral vegetal notes from the kind of like the flower sense of it.
Sure.
Then as the plant grow mature, now all that muscatel, the fruity stuff that is the characteristic of Darjeeling start to come out more on the second flush. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree with that. I was actually thinking of going in a different direction, which is wonderful. How many times have I said that on this podcast? But it's true because both in what you said and I think you might find it interesting on my take on what I thought you said. The flavor of the floralness does come out in the nose and in the first sip. Whether that floral, it's not a rose, it's closer to like more of a jasmine, lighter flavor as a stronger flower, but the fruitiness of the grape kind of comes out in the bitterness of the finish. And I said astringent earlier, but the astringent is just so light and delicate way towards the end. So again, the mouthfeel is strong. The mouthfeel is like, it's very mouth-watering, like it's full-bodied, but light. And it doesn't dry you out right away. It still stays in there. And that's where kind of the grape flavor is. And then after several seconds, then it starts to dry out just a little bit. So that's where I was agreeing with you. It's floral first, and then it's kind of grapey bitter in this cup. But you were referring to floral first and grapey bitter in the flushes.
Well, it's more characteristic of the flavor. I pick out more floral note from here, and it's something that runs through my head right now. If like green grape and purple grape, right? So this is more like a milder grape in there, lighter in like. There's still some fruitiness in there, but it's on the lighter side, or more like a fresh flower, and then young green grape. When the second one, let me try again. But I think that I'm gonna, feel it more of the intense and it being on the ripe grape, right? Let me make sure. let me go back to the sip and see if what I just said is true. We taste this before we bring it in, and that's why we had the two estate going. between we have quercetin first flush,
Right.
and when it go to second flush, we actually didn't like the quercetin second flush. We like the Namring second flush. So
Right,
this is
right.
Namring.
Namring, yeah.
Yeah.
That is the nice thing about Darjeeling is that they do care for their products so much that we're able to drill down on the estates and it's interesting that there's different flavors. Haven't gotten too much into the cultivars of Darjeeling. Maybe that's just like a very guarded secret of like what cultivar it is. I think we did get confirmed that it is a Camellia sinensis Assamica. I think we do know that it's an Assamica variety. But it is certainly very different between the different estates, and it's got to be more than just terroir.
The tea world is big. Tea world is really, really big. Even in a tea business, it's not just loose tea. Someone can do the business in just a tea party. Someone can do the business in just a drink of it. Someone can just do bottle style. The tea world is big.
Yeah.
I'm from Thailand, and I'm interested in the Japanese type, like matcha.
Pure.
So it can take me all my life to learn about matcha, and I would never touch on the fact of Darjeeling. So, but I mean, I have a general knowledge what Darjeeling is, but to be into one, it can take me another 20, 30 years to master and really know about cultivar of what Darjeeling is. I'm sure there's some expert out there. Maybe one day when we have a podcast going and we can talk to some people who know more about Darjeeling, and actually we know somebody. You already know somebody, your tea brother.
So Neeraj from Happy Earth Tea in Rochester made this awesome iced Darjeeling, which was phenomenal. So I think it was cold brewed Darjeeling. You shake it up and you pour it, and it has a nice froth in it. Such a nice strong mouthfeel. And Happy Earth. Shout out to Happy Earth Tea. They're phenomenal out there in Rochester, New York.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like it's just like there's some characteristic of tea in different region. You talk about Niraj did the iced Darjeeling and shake it froth. That remind me of sencha, because when we were in that tea house, they shake sencha and it's so foamy, almost like beer, and it has like a kind of like a white foam on top and green, and somehow that is one of the best flavor we had in the past. So again, the tea world is big. We know a little bit of everything that we can share our knowledge. But to be specific on one thing, we hope in the future maybe we can bring in some expert or someone who know more.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, that'd be a dream come true.
And that's why, and that's the thing about this whole podcast. It's like this is a live conversation that we are having. We don't have this script going. Maybe if you have notes, like I barely have notes because I come in just talk away, because these are the questions that we ask all the time. We live our life with tea, but again, tea world is big. We always have the question.
Right.
So when you have questions, ask us. That's fine. We can give you knowledge that we know. But if not, we'll try to look more into it and try to research out there that can give you more information.
Yep. No, the only notes that I had was the fine, tippy, golden, flowery orange pico. And the other note is the fact that the Darjeeling does fit under a black tea category. But if you look at it, there's some green in there. And if there's unoxidized tea inside a black tea, I don't think that's a black tea anymore. Again, the flavor is so much lighter than a malty black tea that you would expect from even China, let alone India, because although Darjeeling is on the foothills of the Himalayas, it still isn't too far from Assam. Probably completely different climates, but still, it's a completely different product as well. But I think the processing, and this is where some of how you're saying the tea world is wider than the earth, because there is so many microcosms of ways that things are done, and there's a lot of secrets out there. I'm sure there's a lot of secrets out there. Family secrets that aren't shared. And so if you were to ask somebody, is this really a black tea? They will swear that it's a black tea, although you're going to find things that are not oxidized in there. And just one last point is that not all black tea is 100% oxidized. Okay, but it's going to be a 99% oxidation rate or a 98% oxidation rate. Looking at Darjeeling and seeing the green in there, it's hard to believe that is 100% oxidized.
Right. Yeah, it was something that ran through my head right now is you're right. I mean, a lot of things, is kept secret. There's a lot of theory. There's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of things that cross, and if someone go out, an expert go out and try to make assumption of something, but sometimes that assumption still have a lot of loophole in it, or like the question in it, because a lot of them are also kept secret. So that's kind of like one of the stories. The poor last year when we visit, and we try to understand and ask questions like what is Shu and Shang, what is loose pu'er, what is cake pu'er, and then we have the farmer, and this is like third generation of the farmer that try to explain to us, right, in their language, and because the terminology of what they use and what we use in the Western culture here is like completely different, right? The dialect and everything, and they use the word fermentation, oxidize. So hearing all this, I have to kind of like connect the dot and draw the conclusion to myself. And when they were trying to describe to me what pu'er is, because like for them they use the ancient tea, right? Tea trees that grow in the forest, something that they left for like 20, 30, 100 years, 1,000 years. All the 1,000 years no longer, much longer exist. But I think there's some out there that is like over hundreds of years. So, and when it's come to pu'er, they like to use the leaves from all that ancient tea type. And I think they said the tea has to be at least like 10-year-old to consider the wild tea to be processed into pu'er.
100 years.
No, 10 years is a minimum of what they grow.
Yes.
And they were talking about how, like, if it's something that, and some expert can test the leaves from here and say this is a young tea from the tea plant, and then this is the tea leaves from a 100-year-old plant. Like, there's a true expert, a pu'er tester, that can pick out that and can even pick out this must be from this hill, that must be from that hill. Like, it's so deep. So back to like green pu'er, so he tried to explain the process to me, and then he was saying like it was processed like this, like this, like this, and I'm like, well, then it's like green tea. So why do you call it pu'er? Because like that, and then he kind of like, he was like, yeah, I guess that's like green tea, but the reason that it's called pu'er is because it's picked from pu'er tea. But I was like, well, pu'er tea is not just pu'er tea, it's still a tea plant. So the whole, like, this whole going around, so I think that what he means is like, it's come from this ancient tea plant, right? That process to be what? Shang? Shang is the raw one?
Shang is raw.
Right. And then I'm like, okay. So that's kind of like, the way that it get processed, similar to green tea.
Right, and I guess my understanding is that this tea is picked from the ancient tea tree. It is, and then it's not necessarily, there's no oxidation process, but there's no stopping of the oxidation process, and then there's a compression and aging. But after steeping, and even during tasting, you're like, this tastes like overbrewed green tea, or if you've done it wrong. And you look at the tea leaves and it looks like green tea. So that's why we say, well, is it not? It's not oxidized, so it must be green tea pu'er. But again, the makers don't necessarily call it that. So of course they're not going to tell novices, you're right, I should change everything that I've always done and change the terminology because of us.
It's so funny too, because I asked him, what, in the U.S. market, there's what is called white pu'er. What is white pu'er? He was like, there's no white pu'er for me. It's just Shu or Shang. It's all, all out there. Sometimes it's become marketing gimmick, not gimmick, but like for the marketing purposes to develop a new product, right?
And other, so yes, you're absolutely right. So there's the marketing of those who are selling tea and working closely with the tea producers and saying, oh, well, we could just rename this to make it a new product, even though you've had it a part of a tradition and it's in a broader category. We should rename it to something that customers can relate to. But I don't think he was on that side of the business. He was on the making of the processing.
So now me going back to back between the first and second, I have to stay, confirm with my belief that this is definitely more floral and vegetable and on that side of the end, where this one is like a stew that is stewing a little bit better between. There's still some floral notes in there, but the fruitiness of the flavor come out too.
Comes pretty quick. Comes pretty strong, and then there's a much more dryness at the end.
Yeah.
That's more reminiscent of a black tea than the first flush, which it's questionable to call that a black tea by taste.
Right,
If you were to blind taste test this, it'd be hard for you to say, oh, this is absolutely a black tea.
Yeah,
It would be kind of
maybe a strong gunpowder green tea.
Exactly.
Yeah,
really
along that line. So there's definitely, but I do in-house, we carry both between first flush and second flush, even though it's come from different estate, because I like this estate for first flush better. I like second flush of this estate better. And we have, but for the percentage of sales, we sell more of the non-ring. We have a big fan that will just stick with the second flush, because if they like black tea flavor, something pick me up in the morning, they definitely go with the second flush. So that's definitely one good spring tea to try, right?
Yes. I would, just before we button this up, another consideration for this is that it's not, I don't think there's going to be any real full leaf teas that are, you see the bud, you see the leaf. This seems to tend to be kind of more choppy.
Yeah.
And so a brewing basket with a fine mesh is going to be super important when it comes to brewing this. Because if you have a wider mesh, a lot of those particles are going to get to the bottom of your cup.
I actually have a question for you though, because you did a lot of gong fu when in the small pot.
Yeah.
And gong fu is about like different steeping, like 8-9 times to leave you different layers and flavor of the leaves. Have you ever tried a second flush of one? Like not the second flush, second steeping of either one of this?
Oh, I think you can do a second steeping. Gong fu probably wouldn't work out really well. It probably isn't intended for that, but absolutely a second steeping off of this, you will get a lighter experience. If when things are chopped up in a fine fashion, it will infuse rather quickly once, and so it won't hold on to a second or third, but the real underlying flavor of this is light and floral, so that's where you'd be able to get absolutely a second steeping. And whenever you second steep, maybe steep it longer, make sure you have the hot temperature, steep it longer, and then if you need to just top it off with a half a teaspoon or something, just so that way it doesn't go to waste. And then but you still want a more fuller bodied, you can do something like that.
Right.
I mean, that's something that we're very used to doing with actually cold brewing overnight. So if you have a big pot of tea and you're done for it with the day, cold brew it overnight, and in the morning it's going to be something special.
Yeah, and Darjeeling is one black tea that doesn't have the characteristic of rich black. Right. So it's something that I think that is good to do cold brew.
Yep.
So before we wrap up though, because we say that this is not the spring tea that we would drink. That's the only thing that we drink. Is there other thing that you recommend?
When it comes to teas that are good for springtime. So I've given up alcohol for a little while. I'm going to get back to it soon, but...
What do you mean?
I gave it up for Lent.
Okay. It's just for Lent. You said a while. It's like forever.
Okay.
Just a Lent.
3 weeks feels like a long time. So I'm a beer drinker, and I don't always like malty drinks, malty beers, but come around wintertime, come around fall, it does like, you kind of get an yearning to get something a little bit more fuller body. And then come springtime, that's when the IPAs come out, or even the Hefeweizens, the wheat beers, something a little bit lighter, more floral. So that's what happens with teas too, in my opinion. I guess I'll just say myself, I can only speak for myself, strong dark teas, pu'er in the wintertime, and strong black teas in the wintertime, something really, really thick and heavy, that's going to give you a robust taste. Come springtime, that's where, I'm a matcha drinker year round, but that's where matcha really shines. The lighter black teas, that's why we think of this at Darjeeling, but oolongs I think is a great tea that's there too. If not just green teas, but oolongs are really good because they're still roasty and yet still light on the other hand, and a really good tea to drink during this time.
There's some nice oolong too that has like nice floral notes to it. And all we're talking about here is just like pure leaves of like specific type of oolong or like Darjeeling is not blends. Again, Darjeeling is not like English breakfast or Irish breakfast or the breakfast line that have all the black tea blends together. So if you like black tea blend, maybe in springtime, try this Darjeeling because it's still black tea. It might give you different dimension, and now you step into experimental of the single type of tea leaves because the blend have like in English breakfast now it has Assam, Ceylon, everything mixed together to keep that profile. So springtime is perfect to taste tea that have its own identity, specific type. Dark and well would be a good one too. And if you are looking for flavor tea, I would say that's something that have nice floral note. We have orange blossom. We have what other blossom that we have? Candy blossom. That have a it's a blend that have there's use fruit and floral notes to it that give like that refreshing spring is here smell. So next week we're gonna be maybe looking into more of those tea that's good to bring for mom because I think Mother's Day would be coming around the corner, and a lot of time tea is a perfect gift for mom, right? Mom love tea, and you can bring that to mom next time. So I think that would be a good one to talk about next time.
That sounds great. Maybe some. How about snacks that go along with Mother's Day tea too?
Okay, sounds good.
I'm gonna throw that in there as well. You can't just talk about tea. But
tea first.
So I gave up alcohol for Lent, but I did not give up sugar.
Or maybe what do you mean, like snack?
Yeah,
tea infused snack or
either or. So tea infused snacks, we infuse a lot of tea in our snacks here, but I guess more of like a tea picnic or a little tea time with mom, and what would that kind of look like?
Tea time, tea party.
Yeah, a little tea
High
party.
tea, low tea. What it means?
Oh,
that's a nice one. There's a misconception of high tea.
Certainly is.
We need to correct that too.
Downton Abbey's fans, they know, but maybe not everybody else.
Yes. All right, so that's wrap up our episode for this time. We'll see you again next time.
But keep on drinking tea.
Happy spring.